everyone. We have quorum. Reminder, the members of the public are advised our meetings are webcast by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived audibly and/or visually recording this meeting. As well, a friendly reminder of those please turn your electronic devices to non-audible function during our meeting. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda this morning?
Madam Chair, no changes to the agenda.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented, moved by Councillor Johnson, Brenda Johnson, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favour? Carried. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? Seeing none. We have approval of the previous minutes of June 8, 2015, moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favour? Carried. Thank you, everyone. We have no delegation requests today, so we have consent items before us, and I'm going to go through each one. Consent item 5.1, questions or comments. This is on the Development Charges Reserve Status Report as of December 31st. Any questions or comments? Councillor Brenda Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Chair, to either Mike or Lindsay, I noticed that the Bimbrick is $517,701. This was the pipeline that was taken from the region at that time of Hamilton out to the Bimbrick Village. And this, I take it, is still the remainder of that loan to complete that pipeline. Do we have a timeline when this, will finally be zipped? And through you to Mike or whoever was the
financial stability of the Hamilton Waterfront Trust. Finance and Corporate Services staff are preparing a report and will be coming forward to General Issues Committee as requested with a summary as to the financial position of Hamilton Waterfront Trust. And if we have any recommendations to committee, we will make recommendations to committee at that time. But again, you'll recall that there was a request to the City of Hamilton from Hamilton Waterfront Trust for approximately $300,000 in base funding. Right. So we are reviewing that need, but as well we are reviewing their financial statements and their assets to see whether or not there are any other considerations that committee should make at that time as well.
Well, thank you, Mike, for that very political answer. So what you're saying is that all the answers will be coming in the future GIC meeting. Do you have it? And did I miss the timeline on that?
Through the chair, we would target August or September. And again, we will look beyond just the $300,000 base funding request. We'll look at the organization's assets and how they are addressing the sustainability of those assets. That was the point I was trying to raise.
Thank you. And through you, Mike, through you, Chair, to Mike, the Hamilton Queen, we already know that they're selling that off. It was in the paper. We have a private vendor with this right now. The report you're bringing in August, September, is that going to be inclusive of how this past summer has gone without that asset?
Through the chair, we have engaged Hamilton Waterfront Trust to provide some additional information beyond just the audited financial statements with respect to their cash flow, as well as we are asking for additional information as to how they are addressing future liabilities as it relates to their assets. So in the case where either a building or the ice rink or the Discovery Center, what is their long-term plan as it relates to sustaining those assets? So those are the questions that we continue to ask staff for additional information in order for us to bring to committee a comprehensive report.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you. And you've already answered this question, Mike. I apologize, but the balance sheet shows a reduction of about $840,000 in net assets, or retained earnings, sometimes they're called, and $614,000 of that is the boat, which I think Councillor Johnson was asking about. That was sold after the year end, I believe. So was there a recovery of some of that that'll show up in the 2015 statements?
Through the chair, on page 9, you'll see note number 5, and note number 5 identifies the loss from the discontinued operations, the Harbor Queen, and then you'll see assets, and the $22,000 reflects the proceeds from the sale of that asset.
So they only got $22,000 for it?
Through the chair, my understanding that was the scrap salvage value.
But they subsequently sold it to another user. I saw it on Saturday out there. You don't know what they actually sold it for then?
Through the chair, my understanding was the Hamilton Waterfront Trust disposed of it, and as to whether it was disposed by that individual to another organization, I'm not aware. But as I understand, what is before you in terms of the financial statement is what Hamilton Waterfront Trust received from the disposition of that asset, the $22,000 and the salvage value.
So they've been depreciating it for a number of years, and it was $614,000 that was left that wasn't depreciated. Do you know what they paid for it?
Through the chair, I'm not sure.
Okay, because that's quite a big write-down then to write off $600,000. Okay.
Seeing no further questions, may I have a mover to and a seconder to receive the audited financial statements then?
Yeah, I'll move it, but I'd just like to get an information update, what they paid for the vessel, and confirm that the $22,000 is what they actually sold it for, because they're putting it back in use. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask Mike then. Mike, you mentioned earlier when Councillor Johnson was asking the questions that a report is coming in September. Could we incorporate that information in the report coming in September?
Through the chair, if we receive an update that in fact the Harbor Queen will continue to be an asset or used through Hamilton Waterfront Trust, we will report back in our August or September, as well as we'll try to gain some information from Hamilton Waterfront Trust as to the net position as it relates to the Harbor Queen, what it was purchased for versus what the undepreciated value was at the time of disposition.
Okay, so it's moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Aidan Johnson. All in favour? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to go on to item 5.3 is the Municipal Competitive Study 2014. Questions or comments? Councillor Brenda Johnson.
Yep, thank you. Through you to Tom or Gloria. On page 7 of 10, with industrial taxes, it's my understanding that our industrial taxes are going to start to increase over time, that they're starting to come up in pricing. Is this dip that we're seeing coming up, is that a part of that program?
So through the chair, I'll start, and if Gloria has some additional information, she can contribute to it. I just want to remind, as it relates to industrial taxes, I'll just remind committee that is the one class that continues to be protected. You'll see reference in the report specifically around residential. The impact, so recalling in terms of our tax ratios, our industrial continues to have tax ratios that are outside the province's defined range of fairness, and as a result, they are protected. So each and every year when I present our tax policy report, I remind committee that we can only levy 50% of the tax levy increase on our industrial property taxpayers because they're a protected class. So what you see in terms of our tax competitiveness that will continue to have an impact on our industrial. So our large industrial, you'll see in the report, and it's captured on table 7, page 7 of 10, the City of Hamilton's large industrial property taxes are 23% below our comparators. It is our residual, and that's captured on page 9 of 10, table 10, shows our standard industrial. So not our large industrial or standard industrial. That's a class that we continue to have higher than average property taxes. One of the factors that's contributing to that class, that table 10, is in their comparator groups when the province brought about a policy, a plan to reduce the business education tax rates. The City of Hamilton's business education tax rates were at the threshold. So we didn't see an impact from that policy change. Some of our comparator municipalities had higher business education tax rates, so they received some relief. Their industrial property holders experienced some relief from that provincial policy. So that's one of the contributing factors to that change from 2009 to 2014, why the increase. One of the other factors that we're seeing across classes is the impact of reassessment. As the City of Hamilton is experiencing some favorable reassessment relative to average, that's having an impact as well.
Okay, and thank you, Michael. Gloria, do you have anything you want to?
That's okay. That's correct.
I just always feel that the staff come all the way down here for a meeting and then they always leave and never say boo, and they do all this work. So thanks, Gloria.
Thank you. Okay, I have Councillor Collins and Councillor Aidan Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chairman, and through you, if the industrial tax rate and the commercial office building tax rates leveled out at the average, what benefit would the residential class see as a result, through you, Madam Chairman?
Through the chair, I can't provide a percentage, but it's what would happen is you'd see that shift. So the councillor is correct in that it would result in a savings to the residential. Just in terms of the levy restriction, I've asked Gloria, if the City of Hamilton was not restricted as it relates to industrial and we're able to levy, the difference would be that 9% gap in residential. Correct. Would be in that 7 to 8% range. It would shave about 1 to 2% from that 9% value.
And in terms of what we've asked for from the province as it relates to additional tax tools or even economic development powers, there was tremendous debate in the City of Toronto years ago when Mayor Miller implemented new taxes to assist Toronto's budget process, and we decided not to pursue a City of Hamilton Act. Most recently, we've had discussions, and one of the issues I raised was the vacant commercial tax rate relief that vacant commercial properties receive. That number is relatively high and costs us several $1 million a year. Is this another issue that we have on our list as it relates to seeking permission from the province to create sort of a made in Hamilton solution? So the whole issue of providing no ability to increase taxes in certain classes results in other classes, residential primarily, paying more than their fair share. Are we pursuing that still formally with the province, through you, Madam Chairman?
So through the chair, it's a appropriate question given where the province is with respect to reviewing some of their legislation, specifically the Municipal Act and the powers that municipalities have and as it relates to levies, fees, and charges. As the province is going through that review, they are looking at the Toronto Act and the powers that the City of Toronto have that other municipalities do not have, and seeing whether or not there is a rationale for extending those powers or extending new powers or new potential revenue sources to municipalities. And they're going through that engagement process currently. Municipalities have until October 31st of this year to provide input into that process. The councillor referenced the vacancy rebate. That's an issue not only the City of Hamilton are faced with, but other municipalities are. Just over a week and a half ago, I was at a Treasurers Group meeting, and it was raised for discussion is municipalities are seeing property owners speculating and sitting on essentially vacant properties, and they are sitting vacant not only for a year, but in some cases for a number of years. So what treasurers are considering is whether or not there should be limits, term limits on those vacancy rebates in an effort to provide relief to someone who is going through some reconstruction or a change in ownership, but not to reward a property owner who is not looking to provide any economic activity in the neighborhood, and in fact could be creating a challenge for a neighborhood. So that is one of the areas that municipalities and treasurers are looking to provide comment and input.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. Hopefully the province sees fit to make some changes and assist us locally with our tax competitive situation. One last question, and it's related to probably the largest economic development announcement that we've received here locally. It's related to the LRT, and it's not being constructed as a transit project, it's an economic development project. When do we foresee, and I know we're still in the design stages, but construction starts just a few short years from now, how much do we anticipate seeing again from that project, and how will that help our municipal tax situation? What's the uplift again?
So through the chair, I don't have the exact numbers before me, but I think the councillor made reference to when. So it's important to identify when the uplift, the benefit uplift study was conducted by Canadian Urban Institute. They broke down the uplift in 5-year intervals going out 15 years. In the first 5 years, I would describe it as there's some minimal uplift in the first 5 years, somewhere in the area of $1 million a year in additional tax levy. But in years 5 to 6, that improves. But the principal uplift would be realized in the tail end of the period, years 10 to 15. And that ranged up to, I believe, $4 to $5 million annually in tax benefit. So just in terms of the timing, I just want to identify that the study forecast that the uplift would be back-ended, and I believe it was in the $20 to $23 million range was going to be the tax benefit. Also in that study, they differentiated between benefits that would accrue to the municipality versus benefits that would accrue to property owners. And it's important to identify that if a property owner's assessment increases, the City of Hamilton does not benefit from that increase in assessment. The property owner does. If there's a growth component, if a property expands, then the City of Hamilton benefits from that expansion.
Thanks for that, Mike. So just to be clear, if we're 5 to 10 years away from its operation and it's a back-ended scenario, we're looking at between 20 and 25 years. Is that correct?
Through the chair, the forecast that was provided identified that the benefits would accrue at the tail end, the last 5 years of post-construction. Also, I should identify is that study is somewhat outdated. There's been a number of changes in, for instance, around the Scott Park precinct, and it would need to be updated to provide a better estimate as to what the uplift value would be.
That's right. I believe Scott Park precinct was the largest tax generator as part of that study, and now it's all institutional land, so the numbers certainly would change with that. Well, I appreciate that. I think it is important. When we're looking at economic development and growth and tax competitiveness, they really all go hand in hand, and so I appreciate that information. I think that's it for my questions, Madam Chairman. At this point in time, I'd be happy to move or second the report at the appropriate time.
I'll come back to you, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mike. Just a few questions. Number one, how do you differentiate between large industrial users and standard industrial users? Is there a line in the sand?
Through the chair, it's based on square footage.
What's the break point?
I'll have to look at, through the chair, we'll look at the study and provide that information to committee before council.
Because industrial taxes pay $1.18 a square foot, and standard industrial pays $2.62, double, in fact more than double. And so I would suspect you get a lot of pushback of where that threshold is when you go from standard to large, and when the taxes double.
Through the chair, yes, and I need to differentiate between the study and our property, our tax policies. And so I'll provide that information. For the purposes of this study is the authors need to provide some comparison. And so they look to normalize the properties across municipalities. So in terms of the square footage on what they did to define large versus standard, we'll provide that information. But as it relates to our tax policies as well, I'll provide that information as to how we levy across the different industrial property taxes.
Is a lot of the reasons why the large are so low at $1.18 a square foot is because of reassessments in the areas like the Stelco lands and other lands that are sitting idle?
Through the chair, absolutely. That's one of the factors. And as I identified previously, it's a protected class in that we can only levy 50% of the annual tax increases against that class.
When does that expire?
So through the chair, assuming we continue to have 2% levy increases, we have to make some assumptions as to the timing. Assuming 2% annual levy increases, that would expire in another 20 years.
Oh my gosh. But commercial has expired. It used to be commercial and industrial. When did commercial expire?
Through the chair, commercial expired within 5 years, within the last 5 years.
Okay. And just on the LRT issue, you know, we've seen, particularly in the commercial, it's interesting, take a look at commercial office building, we're 19% below the average, but commercial neighborhood shopping centers were 25% above. I would suspect that's a lot of the same reasons because we have so many vacant, or used to have so many vacant offices, particularly in Stelco Tower.
Through the chair it is, but it also reflects on rental rates. So in the case of some of our comparators is, again, recognizing this is a commercial activity, assessment in part is based on your rental, your lease rates. So if it's a GTA municipality, their assessed value and tax impact would be higher because they would be garnering a higher rental rate. I also want to point out, as it relates to the office building, is this is a class or a property where the City of Hamilton is very competitive. In fact, in a relatively recent study, we were the most competitive municipality with some of the lowest DCs.
Yeah, I guess
development charges.
We're the benefit of that in City Centre, where we're getting office space for $8 a square foot, and you know, Lister block I think cost $30 to build it. Right. And that's depreciating it over 20 years. So.
Right. In the case of office building, low property taxes, low land value, and low DCs. So across our comparators, we have one of the most competitive positions as it relates to office space.
And with the big uptake in our economy in Hamilton, particularly in downtown, are we going to see those sands shift? Because I know Jackson Square got a big reduction in their appraised value, but it seems to be a lot busier in there. When do we trigger a reappraisal to get it back to where it was now that the economy's recovered in the downtown area?
So through the chair, in terms of how City of Hamilton staff continue to monitor and protect property taxpayers, is we continue to, through our taxation division, review leases. We ask landlords for information as it relates to leases. We share that information with MPAC, where we are the body who is leasing. For instance, in the downtown, we provide that information to MPAC so that MPAC has the most relevant and recent information. But as it relates to Jackson Square, I should make clear the adjustment in the assessment was a result of MPAC making some assumptions as it relates to the lease rates. They compared those retailers with Lime Ridge and not necessarily a fairly competitive comparison, and for that reason it was appealed and adjusted accordingly.
I appreciate that. And I would think a big part of the average lease rate is, I'm probably wrong in this number, but it's six in my head. We had about a 40% vacancy rate in the lower city in office buildings about 10 years ago, and now it's in the order of 14. So that's got to significantly help to do an uptick on the commercial side, the office side, with that much enthusiasm now in leasing space in Hamilton.
Through the chair, it does, and what we would expect, it would have an impact on the lease rates and rental rates. It should be driving up those lease rates and rental rates as your supply restricts, and assuming there's still strong demand, I would expect we would start realizing some higher lease rates.
And just to picking up on the LRT discussion that Councillor Collins started, once the LRT goes in, do we go through and do a reassessment of all those properties then to try to get that uptake, or does that happen through a natural process when every 5 years a new assessment's done?
Through the chair, it's actually a very fluid process in that as properties come up for sale, they're captured by MPAC, and MPAC is continuously updating their information and database as to the value from the sale of properties or the expansion of new properties.
But they only do a reassessment, don't they? Is it every 3 or every 5 years?
Yes, so in terms of the impact, it would be at the end of the 4-year cycles, but in terms of capturing that information, it's captured on a regular basis.
Okay, so it could be as much as a 4-year delay to capture that then because of waiting for the appraisals to be done.
Yeah, through the chair, just reminding committee the councillor is correct, it's 4-year cycles. The properties are adjusted at the end of that 4-year cycle, and then it's phased in over those 4 years equally.
So it could take as much as 6 years in before it's fully phased in. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Aidan Johnson.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. As all of you, I believe, know, Ward 1 has been hit worse than any other ward with the property tax increases. Yes. And Madam Chair, I know you grew up in the Ward 1, so you have a special concern, and your parents are there. So I know we've seen this before, and I'm alarmed by the reiteration that we're in the category of high in terms of the relative tax burden in Hamilton. I appreciate Councillor Collins' line of questioning about how we can go about getting new weapons, new ways of increasing our revenue from non-property taxation sources. And through you, Madam Chair, Mike, I appreciated our very brief little email exchange about the municipal process that you described. I am very seriously considering introducing a motion, and I'll look for advice, whether it's through this committee or through GIC, it won't be today in any event, to make a formal request to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs that it grant Hamilton land transfer taxation power. I think that is something that's something we have to think about in a serious way. So I haven't decided that I'm definitely bringing that motion, but it's something that's on my mind. I was looking forward to chatting with all of you about this idea. This seems like a fine opportunity just to raise the topic. And a question I have, and I'll look for guidance from you, Madam Chair. I want to ask for an official staff report on what that would mean. So basically the pros and cons of Hamilton getting municipal land transfer taxation power, which to me is essential information for council to have before it makes an official ask of the province. I can't think of a good reason not to ask for that report today. Madam Chair, I need a motion to ask for that report. Am I correct? Or can I just ask for it without a motion, or do I require a motion?
I think it'd be better if it was by motion, but I'd like to put some comments for it before you do that.
And I'm wondering, now or later, is this new business? This may not be related enough to this report, so perhaps I'll wait till new business.
Under new business?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Seeing no further speakers, I'm just going to relinquish the chair to Councillor Aidan Johnson then as Vice Chair. But I did want to just comment because there are discussions going on right now with the number of mayors, municipal mayors with the and regional, with the Ted McMeekin at the Ministry Office of the province, and being very careful, and I know Mayor Eisenberg is involved in this, with regards to tools requesting the province on discussions on what tools, being the Toronto Act that Toronto got, and what they may be prepared of handing down to the municipalities. And I know what you've mentioned as far as the land transfer tax has been discussed. So there's been some things going on, and as Mr. Zagaric mentioned, there's the review that's being done for the Municipal Act as well. So there are some avenues, there's things going on right now. I don't have information I can bring forward on it, but there are discussions at the table.
And I don't want to wreck anything that's happening. I've thought about this. I can't see how requesting this report would screw anything up that's underway, which is why I'm prepared to make the motion.
Just wanted you to understand it. It's on the table. Thank you. So seeing no further speakers, I had Councillor Collins moving the report, Councillor Ferguson seconding. All in favour? Carried. Thank you, everyone. We have no public hearings today or delegations, no presentations. We're going to go right into discussion items. Item 8.1 is the Audit Report 2015-04 Public Works, Hamilton Water, Water Supply, Compliance, Conformance Review. And it is a good news story. So who's going to give us an overview? Bridget, good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Through the chair, I just wanted to give a brief summary of this report. It's rarer in my role to have a good news story, so I just wanted to share today and give an overview. So this was an audit of water supply, compliance and conformance. So this service is one of the most critical high-risk services that the city provides to residents. Overall, the risks related to the provision of a clean and safe drinking water supply to residents are being managed extremely well by the Hamilton Water Division. It took more space in the report to properly describe the service and the related compliance and conformance activities than the actual findings and the recommendations. There was only 2 recommendations. No issues were identified regarding compliance, that is compliance with legal requirements. There were 2 recommendations regarding conformance, and management is working on both of those. They relate to best practices and quality management. And full implementation is expected by December 2016.
Thank you, Bridget. I'm going to go then right to speakers list, and I'll speak after Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, there's no place I'd rather have a positive report than in water. And that's a very critical service we do, is provide good, clean, safe water to our citizens. So I guess this means we have to give another $100,000 bonus to Dan, does it? And I already owe him 100. So. Anyhow, congratulations to Dan and the whole water team for this. I think it's well done.
Yep, thank you very much. Madam Chair, the reason that I wanted to speak was that it was just very recently there was someone going door to door in the Bimbrook Village asking people to sign up for a water filtering system because the water in Bimbrook is bad. So it's really good news to keep coming back with to the residents to say that it is the best water. It's tested 46,000 times a year, and I believe that's not a number out of the blue. It's really an actual number. So I wanted to put that on the record that whoever's going door to door to ask about filtering systems, they're there to make money. It is not because the water is bad. Our water is pristine from end to end. Okay. So thank you so much for everyone. And I see Dan's up there in the audience. Kudos to Dan and the staff for all their hard work. And Bridget, thank you very much for this good news story.
Councillor Pasuda.
Thank you, Madam Chair Pearson. And Bridget, thank you for this report coming forward. Question for you, or maybe Dan up here. We still have the Linden issue with the potential lead in the water. I haven't heard of any more reports back on lead in the water. Where are we at on getting that project as far as the new well going and the new treatment system in there? If I may, Madam Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor, on the existing system, we haven't had any elevated lead readings in quite some time, although the drinking water advisory remains in place out there. If I may follow up with you afterwards, I didn't bring an update with respect to the progress of the new station. I know that we had to have some testing that was undertaken. We had to send it out west, and I'm not. I should have asked for an update before I come over here today, but I'll do my best to get you something today.
Okay, thank you for that. And Madam Chair, also, back in the late winter, early spring, there was a sodium salt issue in pretty well all of the wells out, the city wells. Do we know where that has come from? Through you, Madam Chair, please.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's kind of a peculiar parameter that we have to test for. We only have to test for it every 57 months. And the last time we tested for it, we saw exceedances with it as well. And the reason we have to do the notice to the residents is that some folks have health issues that makes them more sensitive to the sodium than others. And but it's just naturally occurring in the groundwater.
So, Madam Chair, so those levels now have come back down to safe level then?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, because we only test every 57 months, if you draw a line from 57 months ago to now, you can assume that they probably stay at the same level all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to relinquish the chair to Councillor Brenda Johnson, and I just want to also thank Bridget for the report and the great news. It is nice to have good news coming forward from the auditors, and to Dan, to the department. You know where my feeling is with the department, and we all know we're all directors on the water compliance responsibilities. So when Bridget gave this overview at agenda review, I says, this is good, but excellent. And Dan, you know, with the frozen pipe issues this past winter, I think our city has certainly been head and shoulders above any other municipality or any other community that had to go through this issue. And you've certainly done a tremendous job. And so please send back to all of the staff as well. Thank you. So on that, take the chair back. Moved by Councillor Robert Pasuta, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All in favour? Thank you, everyone. Item 8.2 is the audit report 2014-12, Planning Economic Development Bylaw Enforcement. And I'm sorry, who tinkled first? My apologies. Councillor Brenda Johnson.
Yep, thank you. And thank you, Bridget, for the report. I'm just reading on page 3 of 12 at the bottom. Staff will be requesting additional resources in the 2016 budget process, expected completion in Q2 2015. A question through you, maybe not so much to Bridget, but maybe Bill or Marty. Are we looking at supervisory positions that you're going to be asking for, or frontline staff? Could you clarify, please?
Thank you, through Madam Chair. At this point in time, we're looking at our current resources and looking at new ways to take in complaints and act upon complaints. When it comes down to it, our ratio for supervisors is 1 to 16. Sometimes our success with the program has put a lot more pressures on our supervisors. So to answer the question, we'll know better in the spring where we are with new processes, but I wanted to alert you now, we could come to that if we're...
No, and thank you very much for that. As far as the report is concerned, I don't have any questions. I actually want to ask bylaw, well, we've got them on record here, through you to Bill. Bill, you saw the front page of the newspaper on Saturday about the Emerald Ash Borer. For the record, and I truly believe this is not going to be the first time this is going to happen, nor the last. We have an issue with emerald ash borer. We have an issue with dead trees and people in their private land. Could you please, just for the record, walk us through the process of what happens when the complaint comes in to the very end?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Complaints received. We have our officer, who is also a certified arborist, visit the location. They do a primary assessment for safety, and they look at what we can do to work with the resident. Working with the residents, we allow them an opportunity to take corrective measures. In this particular case, it ran on a long period of time. We did our best to work with them, and finally we had to work through what the means of the bylaw to bring a private contractor in to do the work on their behalf.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify this for the record. We give them an order. It says that you've got an unsafe situation. You need to do something. You're willing to work with that resident to get things done properly. Worst case scenario is that the staff have the right to go into the backyard and to remove the trees. I just want to put that out there because I really don't think people understand the process and what's entitled to their rights and what's entitled to safety.
Through you, Madam Chair. That's absolutely correct, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much, and I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you for some leeway.
Councillor Collins.
Yep, thanks, Madam Chairman. I'm just looking at the same page 3 of 12, and under the timing of action, it references that no action was taken on 2 of 10 maintenance service requests reviewed. And I asked this question in the context of the changes that we've made in this area. And as you know, we've put a lot of resources into this area after we undertook our operational review several years ago. So the 20% figure that's referenced is a little concerning. And then certainly below that, when it talks about not meeting the standards in terms of business days where we're supposed to visit and inspect for the first time. So I'm curious to know what percentage of the problems we're experiencing in the paragraph that I just referenced have to do with work ethic versus workload through you.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Collins. The 2 of 10 represents a 20% failure rate. We do agree. Sometimes we have peaks and valleys at different times of the year. Yard moways and maintenance peaks during the spring and summer months. So there's bound to be a lag or delay. We have brought aboard a new student program, which they monitor. They find an awful lot of problems that we address. As for work ethic, our supervisory staff do their best to coach our staff, and we have seen some marked improvement over the last couple of years.
Okay, and so the 20%, is that something we monitor and we'll come back with in future reports in terms of, it seems like a relatively high number as it relates to not providing the service.
I think Bridget's going to answer that.
Through the chair, we do a follow-up audit for each and every project, so that happens typically 12 to 18 months after it goes to committee and council. So audit services will be going back to Planning and Economic Development to take a look at this specific item. We'll be looking at the observations that we made at this audit, and then we will be specifically looking at whether or not the recommendation for supervisors to regularly review this item is in fact occurring and whether the observation has been thoroughly addressed.
And sorry, Madam Chairman, subsequent to that, do we go back to and look at the same officers, or do you do a random sample again through you to Bridget?
Through the chair, we typically do a random sample. On the rare occasion that there was a really pervasive issue, we may go back and focus in on a particular area, but that was not the case for this project.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to relinquish the chair, Councillor Brenda Johnson, if I can. A couple of questions just to that last point, Bridget. I just want to ask, when we do the review, and I'm not sure it would be under the auditor or under the staff and department, do we review repeat offenders? Is that addressed as far as our process? If there's consistently repeat offenders and we're constantly going there, how is that addressed?
Through the chair, can you just clarify, do you mean repeat offenders from a staff perspective or from particular properties in the city?
For the enforcement requests, so hang on, sorry. For the yard maintenance, say, the repeat offenders is residents who continually we get complaints from their neighbors and we have to go back. I'm not sure that you would do it under the audit, it might be just under the department.
Through the chair, if you're referring to page 10 of 12 on Appendix A regarding provincial offence notices, this item did come up. So one of the recommendations was that that PON's provincial offence notices be issued at the time of the second violation for the same offence in the same year or a season. So I believe that would address the repeat offender issue. And we will be including that action plan in the follow-up audit in 12 to 18 months.
Excellent. I just want that to be out there in public record because I think it's very important to know. And that's the only way we're going to get a handle on reducing some of these because it's usually the repeat ones that are taking us the time and our staff's time away. The other end to you, Mr. Young, just on the tree yard maintenance and the issue with the emerald ash borer, and I certainly read the article as well. My first concern when I read the article is, and I don't get me wrong, I understand safety, but I'm dealing with staffing with our contractors right now. I have, we call them standing dead trees. I have 7 in a row on Barton Street and they're still not down. I was told that the crews will be out and I'm wondering how do we deal with this where we're going after residential properties and I have a huge amount of ash trees dead and city right-of-ways in Ward 10 right now. So my concern is I've got safety issues. Are we going to be starting to go after the contractors or city crews?
Mr. Young?
Through you, Madam Chair. Normally, our staff assess our arborist will assess the tree on the private property. We have not done any assessments on city right-of-ways, which would fall under horticulture, and their arborists to assess any safety risk.
Councillor?
Thank you. I just want to make that known out there because there's a very, very large amount of dead ash trees on city boulevards right now in Ward 10. And I know I constantly send emails off, and I know staff are doing the very best they can, but they're also a safety issue. So I'll take the chair back. Thank you. And can I have a mover and a seconder then for item 8.2, moved by Councillor Collins, second by Councillor Robert Pasuta. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Moving on now to item 8.3, corporate culture, values, and ethics. Any discussions, comments on this item? Councillor Ferguson.
I wanted to just, in my experience in the private sector, shifting a culture is a very long, slow process. And I know that, I teased Dan about the $100,000, but generally you shift cultures by offering bonuses if they do shift. And we don't have that available to us. So it's particularly more difficult in the public sector. So I just want to congratulate Chris and his whole senior management team for taking this thing on. I know it's not popular amongst employees. I even enjoyed listening to Chris's, on the communication side, his little summary of what we did at council. I sometimes learn things by listening to that, and I think that we're copied on that. But I think it's an important thing. I think we're making good progress. It's a very difficult thing to do. So once again, just want to congratulate Chris and the senior management team.
Very good point. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? And I motion then to receive this item. Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Arlene Vanderbeek. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. We have no motions today. Notice of motion. Councillor Aidan Johnson.
So, Madam Chair, I'll ask for your advice on this one. You think it's most appropriate to do a notice of motion, and then at our next meeting? Yeah, great. So, my motion is, sorry, I'm clarifying.
You're very good.
I'm new enough that I'm still needing to ask questions. So, am I allowed to insert a whereas clause before my, yeah, so whereas there is a possibility that the province of Ontario will grant to Hamilton and or other non-Toronto municipalities land transfer taxation power through amendment to the Municipal Act. Be it resolved that staff provide a report to this committee regarding potential advantages and potential disadvantages related to Hamilton having land transfer taxation power.
You're putting on as a notice
That's
of motion.
That's a notice of motion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave that on. And there's no other general information or other business today. Seeing none, no private confidential. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Collins. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Excellent.